Thank you for joining us again for another Australian Football Services podcast. We're very lucky today to be joined by David Dome. For many people who follow the A-League will know he is a vital part of the Wellington Phoenix setup, and he's been integral in a lot of their success in the last recent years. So, David, thank you very much for spending some time with us today.
No problems. Thanks for having me, guys.
Awesome. So, David, could you just tell us a little bit about yourself and your history in football?
Yeah, sure. Like most people involved in football, I played it all my life. Not very well, and I still play today. In fact, we played Masters yesterday in the Wellington leagues, and we had a decent win there, so which is not bad. So I think we're sitting third or fourth in the Masters league, which is not bad for an old fellow like me. I played football all my life. Grew up playing it. My parents are English, and sort of came up in that sort of a culture. I sort of never really, to be honest with you, never really followed New Zealand football until the Phoenix came along. I remember I went to the very first Phoenix game against Melbourne Victory at what was then Westpac Stadium, is now Sky Stadium, where we drew 2-2. And I remember thinking, I just want to be part of this. I don't know how. I just want to be a part of this. I remember seeing Terry Serapitos, who was the owner at that stage, walking across the ground and going, how do I get my business card to Terry? Hey, Terry, take my business card. And of course, Tony Pignata was the CEO at that stage. And around about probably 8 months later, they had a vacancy in the marketing department. And I applied for that job and never really thinking that I'd be able to get it. Had 2 or 3 interviews with Tony at that time. I remember TP later telling me he never quite knew whether I was the right guy for the job. Maybe he's right, who knows. But eventually I got through. I think I wore him down and joined under TP when Terry was the owner, and hung around long enough there. When unfortunately Terry had his financial issues, the Wellness guys came in, and then Rob, who's the current chairman, of course, gave me the job as the what we call the general manager over here. So no, I've been honoured, to be honest. It's been an honour to lead the club, and I must admit I've been here a lot longer than I thought it'd be. I thought I'd do maybe 5 or 6 years and then set it up so someone else could come on and take it to the next level. But there's always a challenge in football. You know what I mean? It's never an easy road when especially in football in our part of the world where it's not the #1 sport by any means. There's always challenges, and it's always kept me on my toes. So I've been thrilled and to be honest, quite honoured to be a part of this club.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Nice. David, I just want to touch base on that. You said that you had a game yesterday. How's the body pulling up?
Oh, mate, at my age, it takes... They normally talk about second day muscle soreness after you've had a workout. Yeah. I have about a 7-day muscle soreness. I put my usual warm up consists of copious latherings of deep heat to warm up the muscles.
Nice.
And you just try and hope you can get through it. But it's a very good community actually. Most of the guys that I play against, I've known throughout the years. I've played for a number of clubs in Wellington over the years, and in fact, I played against Jason Pine, who I think you guys will probably know as a commentator for Sky Sport over here. And I played against him. Pine. He's actually a very good player. We both play centre back. He's a little bit more adventurous than I. He likes to get himself forward. However, I think I got one over him on yesterday. Not only did we win 4-2, but I lasted 90. He only lasted about 65. So I'll take that.
Nice, nice.
That's it.
That's a win for me. That's
Absolutely.
a win. That's like 10-0.
Good on ya.
All right. Omar, next question.
Yeah. So David, the last 2 years, Phoenix have did really well. They did really well in the A-League. what's the attribute? What's the secret behind it?
Omar, there's not one secret. There's a number. If you look back at the history of the club, under Terry it was a completely different club. But when Wellington came in, they introduced a whole lot of business rigor around the club. We built, which I still think is probably the A-League's first real academy. So we brought in a whole lot of young players into Wellington, started playing them through our systems, employed some young coaches, had them playing through the local national league. So we did a lot of research. In fact, we were very lucky. There was an academy here in New Zealand based out of Christchurch, Asia Pacific Football Academy, and they actually came to us and said, look, you guys are the future of football in this country. Why are we running an academy? You might as well just move it all to Wellington. So we essentially moved up the whole thing to Wellington. Alex Rufo, unbelievably, was actually part of that academy, along with a number of other very, very good young players. And since then, we've continued to build it, the academy. So that's certainly one part of our success is the strength of the academy. Certainly a very strong and stable ownership group who have seen the value of football and the value of the club and continue to invest not insignificant amounts of money, which you do have to do if you want to be competitive in the A-League. We're not a big club compared to, certainly in terms of the size of our metro. We can't compete with Sydney and Melbourne and even Brisbane. We're about the same size of a metro as Gosford, Central Coast, or Canberra, or Newcastle. So, you have to punch above your weight. We're somewhat lucky in that we have the whole country to choose from in terms of young players, and we certainly have a lot of young players coming to us now because of the success of the academy. And you look at the players that have come through our system. THAT Singh's obviously the big one, but you look at players like Libby Kakachi, who's come through now, and Sam Sutton and Wayno and all these sorts of characters. But you got to remember people like Tyler Boyd, who's now at Besiktas, and actually we lost him from the New Zealand national side. He actually turned out for the United States national men's team. That's unbelievable. From a kid in New Zealand to turn out for the United States national men's team, the full side. He's come through our system as well. Now, we didn't have him for a lot of time, but he was certainly in our academy and what we call our finishing school. So, if you add all those sorts of things in together, that's kind of the success. You have to give a lot of credit to the ownership group, because that's sort of where it begins and ends, to be honest. Unless you have a strong ownership group who continues to invest in the club, whether that be in the academy structure or the players that have come through, then you're really struggling without that level of investment. And I think you've seen that with a number of clubs in the A-League when the owners tire of it. And, we've had a number of, as you guys will know, we've had a number of clubs come and go, Gold Coast United and Towns and North Queensland. Those, when the owners tire or they can no longer sustain the investment financially, they fall over pretty quickly. So we've been very, very lucky that Rob Morrison is our chair and a number of strong owners underneath him, we continue to fund the club.
Good stuff.
Awesome. So David, with Sarpreet Singh, you mentioned before, I think for a lot of A-League fans, and I mean particularly Wellington Phoenix, his transfer over to Bayern must have taken everyone, by surprise somewhat. I mean, he is a quality player. There's no doubting that. With his transfer overseas, the question that comes to mind, I guess, is is there a bit kind of like a business plan whereby Wellington Phoenix is happy to sell these young talented players to what is deemed as larger clubs, as some of the other clubs around Europe have a tendency to do? I mean, the ones that come to mind is being Southampton, where a lot of their players are seen as making a step up to, let's say, Liverpool or one of the bigger European clubs. Is there a similar setup with the Phoenix, or is it something that just you take it as it comes?
I mean, it's a good question, Nelson. So let's be clear, right? The Wellington Phoenix wants to win the A-League. That we are not there just to participate and make up numbers. We are there to play good football and win the A-League. But we also realise we're not. You got to be realistic within the A-League, right? There are bigger leagues and bigger clubs outside Australia and New Zealand. And we always understand that for those young kids who have really outstanding talent, and Sarpreet was obviously the main one that's come through. But you look at someone like Libby, and even look at like Callan Elliott, how he's come in the last couple of games in the resumption of the league. and it's more young, very, very good young kids coming through. Of course they want to go on. And we've always said to these kids, we will not stand in your way. If the right offer comes through, we will not stand in your way to go to bigger and bigger things, bigger and bigger things. Now, we always knew that Starpreet was a special talent and that he was going to go on to something bigger than the Wellington Phoenix. Did we think it was going to be Bayern Munich? No, we did not think it was going to be Bayern Munich. The third largest football club in the world. And look what Bayern's done now. I mean, and to be fair, Starpreet has been part of that Champions League squad.
Yep.
He has been part of that. Now, is he playing with them now? No, because he's been loaned out to Nuremberg, which is great.
Yep.
Because when we look at the clubs that come in for these players, we want to make sure we're making the right decisions for them as well.
Yep.
We obviously want them to go on to other things. So ultimately, it's where the player wants to go to. Like I say, we won't stand in their way. But ultimately, we want them to go to a club where they're going to develop. We don't want them to send them to third division in Sweden or Denmark. That's not where we want to see our players end up. We want them to be at big clubs where they're going to continue to develop, or they'll continue to get game time at the highest possible level, which is what our academy is built around. Young players playing at least 1 or 2 years above themselves so they can develop to their highest possible level. So when Bayern came in for Starpreet, Starpreet had an exceptional under-20 World Cup. When Bayern, what can you do when Bayern comes knocking? You just got to take the offer, right? So, it was a fantastic, and the number of games that Starpreet has played for that first team, he played a significant amount of games in their pre-season. Against European competition. I think they were in Asia somewhere, and they were playing United States, and they were playing against very big teams like Spurs and Spanish clubs. Just wonderful experience for him. And he was playing there, and he was playing 40, 50, 60 minutes. He goes back, and when the league starts, towards the end he played a couple of games, and he's been loaned out. But he played in the Champions League. This is an amazing experience for a young player.
Absolutely.
From our part of the world. And he's playing with Coutinho and Thomas Muller and Lewandowski. The way he's going to learn is, it's almost incomprehensible for us to get a head around what he's done. So just absolutely thrilled. And like I say, there'll be more players that we think will come through our system, will go on to bigger and bigger things. And I think it's great for the league, right? It's not just great for Wellington Phoenix. It's great for the A-League that players can come, because what we have noted before Starpreet was some players wanted to make the leap too early, and they're just desperate. They're desperate to get into Asia. Get into Europe, and they end up going to Asia, or they end up going to, third division, lower leagues in Europe, and they just make the leap just 1, 2, 3 years too early. The A-League is a great league for grounding and learning and learning your craft, and if you can make that leap when you're ready to go, if you're a 17, 18, 19-year-old kid, or Starpreet 20-year-olds, whatever, then it puts you in a very, very good stead, as long as they're at that stage where they can move on to the next level. And so certainly Starpreet was ready to go when he went.
No, I totally agree with you, David. And just touching base on the transfer with Starpreet, how has it impacted your club?
I think what it's showed is that there is a real pathway in New Zealand. Like I said, before that, we had a few really good players that had come through, like Tyler Boyd, who'd gone on to European clubs. We had Joe Bell, who was in our youth academy system, but never really made it the first team because he was very young. Ended up in the US collegiate system, and then is now in Norway. So he's made he's done okay. Logan Rogerson had ended up in Europe as well at Grasshoppers, but never broke through. But when you've got a player who ended up in Bayern Munich's first team playing against some of those superstars, it's shown that the pathway does exist. And that he's just the first, and there could be other players coming through. So we've talked about it a lot as a club, that this is the pathway. Do your hard yards in the A-League, do your grounding, do your education, do your apprenticeships in the A-League, and use that as a springboard up into other leagues. And he's really, I think, probably the first one that's actually shown, because Starpreet was in our academy for, I think he came to us at 15 years of age. So he was in our academy for one of the longest times. We don't tend to take players from outside Wellington any younger than 14, 15. And Starpreet, the moment he was ready to come, he came with the blessing of his family. And then he did his whole apprenticeship throughout, our national league here, the first team, the reserves team, the first team, and then into obviously the transfer to Bayern.
Wonderful. Look, from everything we know about the Knicks, it seems that they've got a very big history of leading young, talented players into the first team, particularly with that sort of staged approach, and it's wonderful to see. In terms of, young talent at the Knicks, you mentioned players like, Libby and I mean, you've got Cameron Devlin and Ben Wayne as well. In terms of players like this and other youth prospects at the Phoenix, do you see anyone following in Singh's footsteps and making a transfer to Europe?
Well, I think Libby's obviously the next cab off the rank. If there's a better left back in the A-League, then I'd be damned if I could find him. I think if we have him next year in the A-League, I think it'd be a big surprise. I think we should just enjoy the talent that he is. Cam Devlin's another one. He's obviously an Australian boy. So Ufi obviously had Cammy at Sydney FC when he was under Steve Corica there as well. So when Ufi came over, he identified a few players that he wanted to bring across. And I mean, Cam Devlin, I mean, besides being just a quality individual, lovely family as well. You look at him, he was obviously, I mean, to be honest, Sydney didn't want to lose him. But they just didn't have the room, right? And if you want to play a young player, it is going to be a bit of a risk. Look at the midfield that Sydney has got. It's hard to get it where he's going to play ahead of Luke Brand. I mean, but look, I mean, he has been a revelation for us, absolute revelation. And again, if he's not one of the top number 6s in the league, I'll let my hat. So we were thrilled when he came on board, and he's done a fantastic job for us. Look, I think he's got a real, very, very bright future in front of him. We have a few young Kiwis coming through. Certainly like Callum Elliott, the right back now, is made that sort of right back position ahead of Louis Fenton and Tim Payne. And we've got a young goalkeeper. I mean, there are some really exciting development, young players being developed over this side of the ditch. And I think Libby will be obviously the next one to go, and there might be one or two more, but they might be a few more years behind. Cammy, I'm not so sure about. I think he'll continue to develop, but I think he'll go down a slightly different path. I'm not sure, but what a player he's been for us.
Wonderful.
Yeah, nice. So we touched base on how successful Phoenix have been in the last 2 years in the A-League, and they have been 2 Australian coaches. Do you expect to see any Kiwi coaches coming up the ranks?
Well, in the same way that we want to bring through young New Zealand talent, we do want to bring through young New Zealand coaches as well. They're just, to be honest, don't really. There's not really that many that are around. I mean, Australia is way further advanced in New Zealand in terms of developing its young coaches, because it takes time, to go from your C license all the way to a pro license, which is your bare minimum now. Is really a pro license in the A-League. It takes time to develop. You can't do that overnight. It takes 3, 4, 5 years to get up to that kind of a level. So there are coaches. I mean, we've had a few in our program. Des Buckingham, who was our coach for a while when we've been in between coaches, Chris Greenacre, and there are some other ones around as well. But certainly, that's where Australia is significantly ahead of us. And if you look at their player, the coaches that Australia's got, so some very, very good coaches. You look at the coaches that have come through the Australian system the last couple of years with, Graham Arnold, obviously, but Ange Postecoglou before him, and look at Ufi and Steve Corica and and Popovich. All these are excellent coaches that are coming through. And in fact, we would be if we hadn't had Ufi, we would certainly be thrilled to have any of those coaches here at the Wellington Phoenix. And there's a next level down as well. I mean, you've got Arthur Pappas, who's been around about with Ange as well up in Japan. I mean, Australia's done a fantastic job of bringing through some really, really great coaches. We just don't have that depth here. It's something that New Zealand football needs to work on. We certainly want to be part of that and help him bring through coaches, but you can't really experiment with coaches in the A-League. Now, we have, we've tried with coaches outside Australia and New Zealand, and it was a disaster. And let's be clear, we made that. There are some, there are some foreign coaches who have come into the A-League and done very, very well. But I think they're the exception, not the rule. And generally, the coaches that succeed in the A-League are ones that understand the Australian New Zealand culture and especially the Australian system. I think that's where Ufi's come into his own. He's really understood the young Australian players who are coming through. And obviously, that's where Cammy Devlin came from. So he knows the best young players because he was obviously involved in the under-20 setup as well. So he understands where the talent is and understands what it takes to win an A-League. He came out of the Sydney FC system, who obviously know what it takes to win the A-League. So that was some of the main criteria. And when we approached Ufi for the role as well. And I think it's been really, very important that people understand the culture of Australia and New Zealand, because it is different to the European system. There's no doubt about it. And you know, both Ufi and Rudes both got that and understood that. And I think that's why we've been successful under those two coaches.
Nice.
Awesome. Excellent. David, is there do the Phoenix have an active scouting department? And if so, do they closely follow the progress of players, let's say, who participate with the Knicks reserves and also in the New Zealand AUSFS leagues?
Yeah, no doubt. So our the National League, similar to the National Premier League in Australia, is not as strong. But for us, what we try and do is identify the very young talent. So we're looking at the 16, 17, 18-year-olds. That's where we want to bring in the boys now, because we don't have the W League system at the moment, of course. That's when we want to bring in the boys down here in Wellington. We have a technical director in our academy, Paul Temple, who looks after all of that, identifies the young talent, identifies the one he wants to bring to Wellington, and then run through the National League. So the National League is an adult competition, but we run it as an under-20 side. So essentially what happens is we're running kids through a national team. And again, it comes back to the strategy, which is to have kids developing at the highest possible level. So if you're playing kids 1, 2, 3 years, 1 or 2 years above, you know, where they should be, they'll develop faster and they'll develop to the best possible level. And that's what the National League gives us. So those kids are certainly identified and invited to join. But at the same time, we keep one eye on Australia as well. And that's why it's very important to have Ufi and also Giancarlo Italiano, who's been with Ufi for quite some time, who helps us with the young Australian talent who might not be already attached to an A-League side, or maybe potentially out of contract with other Australian clubs, and we'll bring them in. And that's why Brandon Wilson's over here as well, and Liam McGing and all these sorts of players. So again, I come back to that point. It's we aren't here to make up the numbers. We're here to win the league, which is why, yes, certainly we want to bring through New Zealand talent, because there is good talent in this country, but there's also very, very good talent in Australia as well. So we need to be recruiting the best young talent that we can be.
Sure. Nice. David, you know that Australia's been talking about having a second professional league. What's your thoughts on that? How do you reckon it would impact the game?
Mate, that's a tricky one, that one. I get it. I understand the desire, and I know the issue for us is when you consider the amount of money that the owners and the A-League clubs have put into it. How do you manage that transition between a second division and the A-League? So what's happening at the moment is, if you want to get into the A-League, you got to buy a license. And the last two licenses that were sold between 10 and 20 million Australian. Now, if you have a second division and there's an automatic promotion and relegation, is how do you manage that? So you've got a lot of owners who put a lot of money into these clubs, and is there enough money? There have been a lot of papers written as what is the size of the football economy in Australia, and can it survive? Can it actually perpetuate more clubs going up and down between the two tiers? And I understand the desire. There are a number of clubs who have been knocking on the door and they're close to it. And, that's why you see MacArthur coming in. I know, South Melbourne has been knocking on the door for years, and there's Wollongong Wolves. These are good, strong clubs who've had a long history of quality football. But can they make the next step, which is millions and millions of dollars worth of investment to try and come up to the next level? And it's a big gap. It's a big jump. So promotion relegation does make sense. I get it. I understand it. It's great for the fans. It's great for the development of the league. But can you manage the financial implications of that between the second division and the first division? And that's the big unknown for me. I've yet to see any kind of study which says this is how you would manage that difference between the two leagues.
Fair enough.
Yeah, that makes sense. Just getting back to the point you were making before, David, about the New Zealand National League. Now, using that as a springboard for a lot of the younger Phoenix players to get their experiences, it does make sense. But in terms of other teams that participate in that national competition, do you guys often see any talented players who can make the step up into the A-League there?
But the difference between us and the other clubs or franchises in the National League is that they tend to be very much focused on winning the National League. We don't care. Couldn't care less about winning the National League. That's not what we're in it for. We're in it there to develop the young players to bring them through to the Hyundai A League, right? So that's really what we use that competition for. So yes, there are other young players, and we certainly, and to be honest, we have gone fishing in that pool from time to time. Mm-hmm. We've brought in a really few. Albireira, we've Ernie Merrick discovered Albireira at Auckland City, and again, what a player he came through. He was an older player, late 20s, 30s, I think he was before he came to us. Developed later, came out of Spain. I think he was in New Zealand on a working holiday. I think he was a paramedic. Our youth team played against him. Ernie saw him in a pre-season, said, why haven't we signed this guy? Came in and turned out to be an excellent, certainly for the first couple of years, turned out to be an excellent holding midfield player. Played in one of the All-Star matches. It was a quality player. So yes, we do. We certainly we shop in that pool, mostly for young players. Though, to be honest, mostly for young players, and because most of those teams are interested in winning the league, they tend to run older players. There was a National Youth League, which has now been put on hold for a variety of reasons, but we often look to shop in that window as well, as opposed to the National League. But the National League is very, very important for us in terms of developing the players and keeping an eye on, like you say, keeping an eye. To be honest, we actually use our networks within the New Zealand football system to identify players. So Paul Temple does a good job of bringing up, keeping across other players, and there are football camps and national programs, camps, development camps that we attend to just keep an eye on the players coming through. Callum McCall was one of those, obviously. Callan Elliott, we talked about a bit before, is the right back. He actually came through Paul Eiffel School in the Wairarapa, which is about 2 hours north here of Wellington, and he came through IFE, and IFE rang us up and said, you need to have a look at this kid. He'd come into our system, spent 2 years here, and now he's turning into a quality right back. So certainly keeping our eyes open, but mostly using through our contacts as opposed to the National League Youth League system. The National League system, which we mostly use for development of the players once they're in our system.
Sure.
Nice. I know we've been focusing on the men's. What about the women's? Are you guys thinking about maybe a women's Phoenix team, attending the W League?
Oh, look, we'd love to. We'd love to. I've been banging on that door for about 3 years now to try and get us in. There are obviously financial constraints, because of the travel and all that sort of stuff. And again, the football economy around the W League is not necessarily strong enough. I think we've got a worthwhile solution. There's no doubt that the joint bid for Women's World Cup 2023 has helped that. I must say, James Johnson has been very supportive. In fact, Greg O'Rourke and Tracy Scott, who both work in the leagues now, are supportive of a Phoenix team in the W League. Generally, as a whole, the league wants to align A League and W League licenses as a general rule. So we're obviously keen to be part of that. We're working on it now seriously for the last 6 months. Like I say, I think we've got a workable solution that we could make it work this year, and hopefully we'll have that across the line. But it's not easy. But there is a general willingness to do it, and I think that's both from us as a club and also from the league / FFA. And like I say, James Johnson's been supportive, so that's really positive.
Awesome. So, in terms of the women's game, what are your thoughts on the upcoming Women's World Cup?
Oh, I mean, how exciting is that?
Yeah.
It's if you look at France, the last World Cup in France, it just went nuclear in terms of its exponential growth. So I think to have that competition down in our part of the world and that quality of that football being played on our pitches, broadcasted around the world, to be honest, you kind of looked at it and go, I think this is potentially our last crack at it, because after this time, I think the money flowing into women's football now is much, much greater than it has been in the past. So the ability for Australia, certainly in New Zealand, but maybe Australia and New Zealand to host it, certainly for an OFC region. So we're still officially an OFC. So for an OFC confederation to be a co-host of the Women's World Cup, I think probably our last crack at it. I think now it'll go from strength to strength, and you'll be looking at big economics to try and get a Women's World Cup to your part of the world. But I think the bid was very, very strong. We was obviously very, very supportive of it. We put in our support from it. I think, again, coming back to your question before, Omar, about how you can a Phoenix W League side as a legacy project out of the FIFA World Cup, I think was, to be honest, a significant part of the bid and a significant part of the proposition that this part of the world put forward, is that you would have now a professional football club or a professional women's team based out of an OFC region. We've been talking to OFC about what that looks like. We'd love to have OFC players in our W League side. So, having a pathway for players out of the islands, young female players out of the islands to play professional football, what a legacy project or a legacy outcome for a FIFA World Cup, I think is magnificent. So it just ticks so many boxes, and we're just thrilled that it's happened, and, I can't wait. Hopefully it's not too far away that we can announce a W League side, but there's still a lot of boxes to get ticked, so I don't want to count any chickens yet, but certainly working very, very hard on it.
Yeah, nice. So being the only NZ team in the A-League, what's the support like with the businesses or services around Wellington towards your club?
Look, it's hard work, and I think any A-League club will tell you that, because in Australia, you've got AFL, NRL, cricket, tennis. And in New Zealand, we've got rugby, obviously rugby union, rugby league with the Warriors, who are based in Auckland, which is the largest metro. We've got cricket, which is a huge sport here. You're fighting for those dollars. Netball, which is a very big sport here in our part of the world. Somewhat complementary, but no doubt it sucks up some of that corporate dollars as well. You got to really find your niche, and it's hard. We're lucky in that we've had a very, very core suite of partners who have stuck by us. But it's become difficult, no doubt, with COVID, in terms of being able to. Everyone's feeling the pinch. The league's felt the pinch. We're going to have to replace some sponsors there, and we're going to have to replace some sponsors over here as well. But the general feeling is that people get it, right. They get that football's the number one participation sport in this country, as it is in Australia. It's the number one participation sport in our countries. So kids and their parents love it. It's just how do you then commercialize it? We know that our social media numbers are huge. People are consuming A-League football on Twitter, on Instagram, on YouTube in the hundreds of thousands. And it's just how do you translate that? So that's the challenge, and that's not unique to us. That's across the whole league, and indeed, that's the whole marketplace is shifting. And you see the Americans do it particularly well, and the Europeans, because the thing is with Europe, right, it's the number one sport. They just have to roll out of bed in the morning, and there's a check there for 100 million euro. They get a front of shirt there for 100 million euro. Yeah, all right, no problem. How many 100 millions do you want? We'll just write a check. It's a different world to what we have to live in, but it's part of the challenge, and you just got to be up for it, otherwise you're in the wrong business. But it's a challenge, and the good thing is you're right in that we are the only club in New Zealand, so it makes it somewhat easier. But we're up against a lot of other codes which are very, very strong here. Obviously, rugby and cricket are the big ones.
Awesome. Nice. And just finally, David, so you've been involved in football for a while now. What sort of advice would you have to young aspiring coaches, managers, and let's say kids or adults who dream of being CEOs within the football scape?
Yeah, you just got to keep banging away at it. So look for your opportunity. I mean, I think we have about anywhere between 20 and 30 volunteers that we use. Start where up until our event manager before our current one started off as a volunteer, and he's now he's now the event manager of the Hurricanes, the rugby union franchise. So that's how you get in. If you start in the volunteers on our game day, you just come in and you be part of the club, and you work out how it functions and how you can add some value. I didn't start. I came in through the marketing door. I didn't really have a marketing background. I came in through more like a strategic marketing background. It's just really funny how, the difference is these days, of course, you have, sports specific diplomas and all that sort of thing. I never had that in my day back in the 1800s, you couldn't really do those sorts of things. But, and to be fair, actually, we are working on a football specific diploma based around this club now. And part of the rationale for that is to have a career for our young players coming through our academy, because not every young player coming through academy is going to be a pro footballer. It's just not going to happen. There's just not enough spots. So we're trying to give them an education outside that, a tertiary education based on football that they can go on to. And part of it is that you're working amongst the club. So of course that diploma, once we get it up and running, potentially will be open to anybody. And you join that diploma, you do some internships at the club, you get to understand the background, and then once you go and your CV is in amongst 30 other people that want to be employed in a football club, and it's got, well, I actually worked in a football club, I did this money in internships, I worked this amount of hours for free, I did this kind of diploma which is based around football. You go, well, you've got to head up right from the start. And then if you want to be if you want to end up being a fool like me and end up being the general manager or CEO, then you just got to outlast everybody else. You just got to stay there long enough, and then be last man standing, and you get the top job if you think that's the right thing that you want to do.
Sure, that sounds like excellent advice, actually.
David, I know Anil said that was the last question, but I just this isn't a question for you. This is just a statement. My business partner, he actually came to watch a Phoenix versus Adelaide game at the NZ, and he remembers you walking past, and the crowd actually called out your name and you waved. So we can clearly tell that the crowd really love you, and you're a people's person. We can tell by just the way how you are, and I hope everyone in the football game is like you, because it shows a lot about a person's character and what they can give within the game as well.
Well, I appreciate that, Emma. So was that at Wellington, was it? At Sky Stadium?
That was at Wellington. Yeah. So my business partner was there at the game, and he said that he was watching the game and you walked past, and as you were walking past on the field, I guess, the crowd just chanted your name, and you gave them a wave. So yeah, it's that's the things that we live for. You know what I mean? Just for the crowd, for the game. And
I've always said I'm only a fan. I'm just a fan. You know what I mean? I just happened to end up in the club, working at the club for some reason. And who knows how life works? But I just ended up working at the club, and I love the club. I've always loved, like I said, that first game. I remember it against Melbourne Victory, and we drew 2-2. We were down 2-0, and we came back in the last 10 minutes to draw 2-2. And I remember thinking, oh, this is just unbelievable. And I just, when I go down, we often have fan events down at some of our corporate partners as Kapura, and they run a number of venues in town. And we often have, fan functions and events. And I talk to the fans. I don't talk to them as the general manager. I'm just talking to them because I'm a fan like you. I sometimes I know a little bit more, but I actually don't. Sometimes I'm actually staggered by Yellow Fever is our fan group. I'm actually staggered by actually some of the insights Yellow Fever have. I haven't told them this stuff, and I've read some of the stuff on the forum. But how do they know that stuff? That's actually pretty accurate. The fans are very, and if you read, I read some of the 442 forums, and so the fans are very educated in Australia and New Zealand. I don't know where they get their information from, but they're very educated. They're very clued up. They understand the game, and I think it's just years and years and years of just loving football. And it's a game we all love. It's a beautiful game, and when you watch a great game, and you just want to be part of it, and you just want the game to succeed in our part of it, in our little part of the world. And we're just lucky that we have a professional league in Australia and New Zealand, and long may it continue.
Absolutely.
Well, look, I can tell, David, that you mentioned that you're just a fan. You're just an average person who just loves the game, and it's good that that hasn't changed. We can tell that you haven't changed as a person. We can tell that you haven't gone into that stereotypical general manager character, which really makes a big difference. Makes a big difference for the crowd and the game itself.
And I'll tell you, our owners are like that too. Like I watch the game with my owners, and they'll be up there and they'll be jumping up and down and they're celebrating like everybody else. I mean, they love it. I mean, they're not really. You can't say they weren't football people, but our owners is a consortium of Wellingtonians, and they just wanted the Phoenix to survive for the city, primarily for the city and then for the country, because when Terry was going under, if the Phoenix goes under now, that's it. There's nothing for football in this country in the foreseeable future. So Rob, it was actually Rob's older brother, Lloyd, who sadly passed away from leukemia very, very soon after the Phoenix came to being. And so Lloyd brought all these people together. And when Lloyd passed away, Rob took it over. And they're here because they wanted to do it for the coach. And I've often said, you know, this is running a football club. Running a football club is like philanthropy on a grand scale. It's like you and I would give $10 to Bernardo's and to Save the Children, all that sort of stuff. These guys are writing checks and with lots of zeros on the end of it to keep football going in Australia and New Zealand, and they should be applauded and recognised for that because it's not easy. And you know, a number of times we went through a particularly bad time 2 or 3 years ago when we were trying to be ousted out of the league. That was very, very hard. I tell you, it was very, very hard for all of us at the club. You know, and the owners, and I don't know how we got through. I really don't look at it. I look back at it now and I go, it was only for the strength and chairman that we got through that. And, you know, if it had been somebody else, maybe Phoenix wouldn't have existed. And it's so crucial, given that the size of the football economy in Australia and New Zealand, we can't afford to lose clubs now. We need to have our 10, 11, 12 clubs, and we need to have strong clubs with decent financial backers. And we just don't have the luxury of losing good people who just want to do the right things. They get nothing out of it. They get very little out of it, except that they want football to succeed in Australia and New Zealand.
Absolutely. I mean, I do remember that particular time that we had the social media campaign #SaveTheKnicks, which went viral, and it was great to see because you had many fans from basically all other clubs in the A-League rallying to support the Knicks because very much like you said just then, the competition cannot afford another Gold Coast or North Queensland Fury. It's just going to be a lot more detrimental to the league on a whole rather than just individual clubs.
And that's a very good point that you raise now. So for us, we were genuinely touched by the support that came out from all the other clubs. Yes, so there were certain knockers who said, yeah, why have we got them? Why don't we have somebody else? You know, why don't we bring in South Melbourne? Why don't we bring in Wolves or whatever like that? Not understanding that there isn't the capital there to support it. But all the clubs, every single club chairman to a person came out in support of the Wellington Phoenix, as did every single club and the majority of their fan bases. And it really did touch, because we just didn't know. We really felt on the outer. We really felt like the years and years and the many millions of dollars sunk into this club was going to evaporate overnight. But then, like you say, that the Save the Knicks came out, and we were genuinely touched that there was a real warmth and a real willingness that there was a little club in Wellington that the rest of the fan base and the Hyundai A-League wanted to keep as part of the league. And you know, it was very tough. It was very tough at that stage, but it did keep us going. That we knew that the majority of other fans wanted us to stay, and they did recognise what we brought. They recognised that, you know, a little club was trying to do the very best it could, and they were bringing through great players. And, you know, you look at the players that have come through, like Marco Rojas and Costa Barbarousis, and all of these players that have come through from Wellington and gone to bigger and better things at other A-League clubs, that besides the ones that we've already mentioned gone into Europe, that there was a real a warmth toward Wellington. And we were genuinely thankful for the support that shone at that time.
It was fantastic also to see, you know, after things kind of settled a little bit after all of that controversy, that the Knicks just went from strength to strength, and they were actually proving a lot of the people that had expressed those doubts as to what they offer the league. I think they proved a lot of those people wrong, and particularly the last 2 seasons, as we discussed before, they've been very, very strong competitors within the A-League. And I mean, you look at this season in particular, some of the performances have been fantastic, and the football that the Knicks play is just delightful at times to watch. I was just going to say, you don't want to lose that. And looking back at last 2-3 years at what was transpiring, and now if we had, you know, the foresight to see what the Knicks would offer, I don't think people would be even doubting that.
I think that was a disappointing thing for us, because it seemed to happen. It was just at that point in time when we were really at our lowest ebb, when to be honest, we'd made the wrong choice. We made the wrong choice with the head coach. we'd seen that there was some success with European coaches in the A-League, and we thought that potentially that's we could replicate that, or that is what we needed. And boy, we got that wrong. No doubt about that, we got that wrong. When we went back to, tried and tested, good young Australian coaches, and hopefully some stage in the future New Zealand coaches, but let's just say good young, Australian coaches coming through, that's when it turned it around, right? And we got, and we combined the best of young New Zealand with the best of young Australian talent, and then we sprinkled in a few internationals, and it sort of came right. And then we clicked, and then it's come right very, very quickly. And I can't say enough about Ufi and what he's he's built on what Ruud has gone, but he's really taken it to the next level. And the football that we've played this year, even those first 4 games, we didn't win a game in the first 4 games. Yep. But I swear to God, we were not at all worried, because we could see what he was trying to do, and we were going, yep, let's give him the time. We've got to give him the time. And Ufi did say to us pre-season, he said, this is not going to change overnight. I'm going to need a little bit of time. And he was spot on. I think he was actually a little bit surprised that it came right after about 4 games, because then we sort of went on that big spree. We didn't lose a game for ages. But I think, again, if Wellington is bringing anything to the table besides young Australian, New Zealand football players coming through, we're also proving a good ground now for coaches as well. And I think both Ruud and Ufi will go on to bigger and better things in due course.
Cool. Well, David, thank you very much for sitting down with us tonight. It was lovely catching up and chatting. Good luck for the finals and the rest of the year as well. Stay safe, and we hope to have you on the podcast again sometime soon.
Anytime. Love to do it. Thanks guys.
David.
Appreciate it.
Thanks a lot, mate. Thank you. Cheers.